a bit. So I kind of put him on the spot really quickly, asked him to come and to give our community just a bit of discussion about the intersection between psychology and Islam. He has a very interesting story as well as how he embraced the faith. And so, inshallah, hopefully he'll share that also with everyone. And so I always tell him that he's part Austinite as well. So because he had actually married Hazak Sheikh's cousin. So he's related to Hazak Sheikh, and in that way through marriage. And Hazak Sheikh, he grew up here, or at least he was in college here with us. So I always tell him he has that connection to Austin, and hopefully, if at some point that he will actually transition here, he'll be a valuable part of the community. But inshallah, we'll leave it up to Allah. So I'd like to thank him for taking this offer, and also welcome his family as well, who also came out on a very quick notice to be here with us tonight as well. All right, so I'll turn it over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to thank my family who is actually here. My uncle Dumer, my aunt Rita, my cousin Dr. Dominique Isaac, and my other cousin Lauren. Thank you for coming here. And I will tell you, first and foremost, the importance of family is so vital. And for them to be here I really truly appreciate the support. And this kind of segues into my presentation and just the reality of what it means to be a convert or a revert, because that within itself can be a very controversial term. My introduction to Islam, in many ways, has been a lifelong introduction. In that I grew up in a Catholic, Haitian Catholic family. I went to an all-boys high school, Catholic high school. During college, the aspect of spirituality always really attracted me. But at the same token, even as a child, going into Sunday school, there are certain things that I had a very tough time acknowledging. I consider myself a strong Catholic at that time, but there's a certain concepts that I really, really struggled with. But still progressed, still continued my faith. As an undergrad at Cornell University, I made an effort to reach out to other faith communities. So I would pray with the African American kids that were part of the Baptist community. I did Sunday school with the Korean kids, and I just tried to learn as much as possible. But a really interesting thing happened to me when I went to medical school. And I went to the medical school of Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. And basically within physicians, there are two branches that physicians choose. They either choose the MD allopathic trend or they choose the osteopathic trend. As the son of a physician, an MD, I wanted to be unique. So I chose the osteopathic trend with the philosophy that I could be a primary care doctor. But I do feel that primary care physicians are the smartest physicians in all of medicine because they take care of everything. They're brilliant. I can't say enough of family medicine physicians, and that was my desire to pursue medicine. So I go to the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and at that time, one of my classmates, who actually happened to be a white convert from Cornell University, was there. And I remember asking him to, I'm interested. I would love to go to a mosque, get a feel of it. I had been to Islamic presentations before, and he took me up. I took him up on his offer. He had invited me to go to this mosque, and I go to the mosque in Philadelphia. And the first time I heard the Hazan, I felt as if my heart had melted. I could just feel the warmth of the faith, and at that time I knew that I had found home. But I didn't convert immediately because, again, I am a scientist and you can't just do things by pure emotion. So I studied. And one of the things that really got me was my cadaver. Basically dissecting a human being. That really, really affected me. And I was the type of person that I've always worked really hard, but I didn't always get the results that I wanted, because later in life I found out I suffered from ADHD. And I use that example because when you are neurodivergent, there are other skills that you have to develop. So the beauty of this is that when you have this unique gift, you really tend to focus on specific things and you think a lot. And I remember, I'm basically dissecting this person, this body, for lack of a better word. And I realized this was a human being. And what did this person experience? How was life? What was the meaning? Was this a sweet person? Was this an arrogant person? But at the end of the day, here I am dissecting this person. And there would be times where I would go to the lab, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. No one else was in the morgue. It was just me and 50, 60 bodies in all forms of dissections. And it's not as spooky as it may seem because it's not like, they go from section to section. But still, I would think, what's the point? What's the point? Why do we do these things? And what was really unique about this is that, in my family, it's a very, very loving family. I have phenomenal uncles, loving parents. My aunts are just phenomenal, always supportive. But with that said, it's a first-generation immigrant family. And I think we can all kind of relate to how education is something that cannot be compromised. My father, who was a physician radiologist, his attitude was that, you can do, as long as your grades were okay, life was good. But if your grades were not good, then there would be some serious problems, some serious ramifications. So for me, a major motivating aspect was to be in my dad's good side. So hence I would really spend a lot of time, as much as possible, to get the best grades. But then you think, what's the point? Is it just to get into a quote unquote good school? Is it to have a quote unquote good job? But what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? So it made me think. I'm looking at these bodies. I'm just really, really reflecting. And at the same time that I'm reflecting, a year later, I finally made Shahada. And I'd originally made Shahada within the Sunni school. Okay? And I made the Shahada as a Sunni. And during my second year of medical school, one of my brothers, Steve, had started law school at UPenn. So I'm in medical school, Steve's is in law school. And Steve started to see a change in me. A little bit more conservative, I would say in a positive way, but still, there was a change. And this is how life is so funny. At the same time I was in medical school, the first 2-3 years, I was actually living in a fraternity house. but it was a medical fraternity house. So basically, these were guys, they had been in a fraternity. All, and it was predominantly was mostly white guys. So they had been in fraternities in college, and we all lived together in medical school because it was much cheaper. It was good to have a immediate study group. But the beauty of it was that the guys that were there, because we were in medical school, so we were looking at this higher point in life, we'd have these phenomenal discussions. And the beauty of it, like, one of the guys in the house was a president of the Christian Medical Dental Association. So we had these discussions, and it was Asian guys, black guys, a Latino guy, like those all of us. And we just have these discussions. And I remember this one time. This was during the guys were having a Halloween party, and one of the guys, who I think wound up becoming a surgeon. He was like your classic Ken and Barbie guy, like this blonde guy whose parents were like upper middle class. He had his girlfriend like Barbie, so whatever. So these guys, they were dressed at this Halloween party. The guy was dressed as Oscar the Grouch of Sesame Street, and the girl was dressed in another way. So I'm saying all of this stuff. I was trying to avoid that stuff, but then these guys were talking. We started talking about religion in this context, and this is a beautiful perspective. The guy stops me and goes, "Ulric, I mean, look at me. Like, what do you mean? Look at you. Look at me. I'm dressed like Oscar the Grouch. I can't have this conversation with you." And I was like, okay, think about it. What are you doing? What's motivating you? And so that was like one very, 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 very profound example that was basically, I was rightly guided. I was going in a correct direction. Another incident that was really profound was that I would say maybe the smartest guy in this house, and probably one of the smartest students in this medical school, and who now I'm sure is very, very successful as a physician. While I'm going through this journey of becoming a doctor, becoming more spiritually aligned, and what that means, this guy talks to me. He goes, Ulric, I'm noticing, the things that you're doing. You're watching your diet. Certain conversations you're not being a part of. Even though you're in this surrounding, this frat house, you're not necessarily completely a part of us. It's we see the distinction. But you know what? I really love what you're doing. This religion of Islam is really making sense to me. I'm like, great. But then he says, I can't become Muslim. I'm like, why can't you become Muslim if this makes sense to you? He goes, look at me. He was not dressed as Oscar the Grouch. He was actually dressed as a physician. But he goes, look at me. I'm a white male. I'm also first generation. My parents are from Poland. Came to America, living in Pittsburgh. My dad's a blue collar guy. I'm not like these other kids in this house who are privileged, who are the sons of doctors or whatever. By me becoming Muslim, I'm going to give this up. I'm going to give this privilege up. I just can't do it. That was the end of that discussion. I left the house and I moved in with my brother Steve. So we basically spent the last 2 years, my last 2 years of medical school, his last 2 years as a law student, together, living together. And again, beautiful experience. 1 year after us living together, Steve made Shahada, and Steve is also Muslim as well. And now it goes back to the perspective of my father. So my father is my hero. My mom, to me, my mom is a living saint, right? This is a woman that's very, very Catholic, that goes to church every Sunday, volunteers at the local hospital, just really, from my perspective, a really solid, beautiful woman. So how are my parents going to take this? My parents had two interesting perspectives. My mom's perspective is, why are you Muslim? Because you have no sins. So I was like, Mom, what are you talking about? So her perspective is that people that convert to Islam are people that, that did a lot of bad things, and they're trying to clear their soul. So that was her perspective. My dad's perspective was a little bit different. My dad's perspective was, and obviously that's not true, okay? But it's stereotype, it's a narrative, it's a story, right? My dad's perspective is, okay, fine, you've accepted Islam, but you're going to be a doctor. And the reality of the matter is that you're going to be a black doctor. And the reality is that anti-blackness exists. And to be quite honest, you'll find anti-blackness within the professional Muslim community. The Arab doctor will refer patients to a Christian Arab before they refer them to you. The South Asian doctor will not necessarily have your back. So why are you further isolating yourself? If anything, practice taqiyya. Just don't tell people what your faith is. And to basically validate what my dad had warned me about, when you first become Muslim, there's kind of this, a neophyte, excited period, right? My God, everything makes so much sense. I found the proverbial secrets of life, and then reality smacks you upside the head. So one of the things that I would do, like as a medical student, on Fridays, I would ask the doctors if I could take at least 2 hours to go to Juma prayer, okay? And most people were somewhat receptive. But I remember this one period that I went to where I asked the doctor, the chief resident, who was a little bit of an arrogant guy, if I could take time to go to Juma prayer. I said, can I take 2 hours off on Friday, and I will make it up by doing 2 extra overnight shifts. I'm thinking that's a pretty good deal, right? And his response was like, why? And, naive medical student, I'm not really attuned to HR regulations. I said, well, I'm doing this because I want to go to Friday prayer. The guy happened to be a white guy in a different faith, looks at me up and down, then looks at the guy next to him and said, this guy is black and Muslim. That is so expletive, bad word, up. The guy that he pointed was a South Asian guy, a Muslim South Asian guy. And his response was laughing. So what my father had said had become reality. But did that destroy me? Absolutely not. Because I realized that this guy was a clown, was a grifter, was a fake. And I will take this religion and make it my own. I continued to move forward. I say this because you're probably wondering, what is a guy from New York, at Hackensack University Medical Center, doing in a mosque in Austin, Texas on a Friday night? The reason why I'm here is I'm glad to see my family. I'm also here because I'm at a conference. My role is I'm the chief of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Division at Hackensack University Medical Center, the #1 hospital in the state of New Jersey. And I'm here for a conference, the American Association of Directors of Psychiatry Residency Training Programs. So basically, this is the conference that all program directors basically attend. And I'm on the executive board, and soon to be the treasurer of this organization. And part of the executive board, I am the chair of the JEDI committee, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I say this because, again, this is Texas, and there's been like a lot of controversy worldwide about DEI issues. And I'm just coming from a program where I actually presented the ramification of the Supreme Court decision, that's against affirmative action. So right now I'm kind of like, a little bit revved up. But alhamdulillah, it was a really great presentation. I love the opportunity to talk truth to power and not back down. And one of the things about this conference, about this event, is that all during this week, people have come up to me asking about, what are we to do with the ending of affirmative action? What does this mean for actually bringing students into medicine? And again, this conference is basically planned years in advance, right? So in October, September time, people in my committee were coming up to me and said that we cannot have this conference in Texas because of the state's regulation of DEI projects. And to put like a long story short, we decided to have it. But the reason why I kind of bring this up, and it kind of talks about what attracted me to Shiaism. I think of Imam Hussein, Imam Ali, beautiful sisters like Zainab. The strength that they have. If you look at waiting for the return of our Imam. And you see how the struggle continues. But you also know at the end of the day, beauty always survives. Goodness always survives. I often tell, there's a saying that good guys, good people finish last. But I often tell my residents that's not true. Good people, eventually you will do well. Now, granted, and my cousin Dominic will probably appreciate this, but medical school, we have these people called gunners. So the gunners are the people like, oh my God, I gotta go into surgery, and I'm gonna be overly aggressive, and I may even do unethical things, but I'm gonna be the top person, right? And even when you're done with medicine, you'll still see these people that are so status, but not just medicine, it's all walks of life. And they have this mentality, the end justifies the mean. Whatever you need to do to get what you need to get, whether it's that 4,000 square foot house with the nice Teslas, doesn't matter, I got it. But the reality of the matter is that if you get these things and you've compromised your spirituality, you've compromised your soul. What have you really gotten? Whereas the person that takes the necessary steps will eventually get these things and actually enjoy them. In my role as a physician executive, I have been in situations where I've had to fire doctors. I've had to fire surgeons because they got into these habits that would lead to serious issues. So this is my point of always being really, really consistent. You know, brothers, do you have anything to say? But I see you guys are laughing. Is there something that you'd like to share with us? Okay. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about where I'm coming from and where I'm going. Now, I do want to kind of talk about, faith and mental illness and what does that mean. One of the things that I often say is that when you are working with a faith person that has faith, you really do have to have respect for them. So like right now, I'm currently writing a chapter on that's going to be published in the American Psychiatric Association that talks about how to take care of Muslim population. And we're looking forward to, hopefully this book will come out in the next year. And my specific chapter is a chapter on converts and reverts. And basically, this is very, very, very applicable, is that oftentimes, we can feel very strong about our faith, but I can't emphasize how important it is to be able to respect other people. And, because at the end of the day, people, whether they come to their faith or not, people don't always remember what you did for them, but they remember how you made them feel. Okay? So if you do it for a person, then ultimately you may have said the best things, but if you feel that that person disrespected you, that is what you're going to remember from that person. So I have to say, and the reason why I kind of bring that forth is that one of the things that people that were born and raised within the faith is you need to be able to provide empathy and not be so judgmental with people that were not necessarily born into faith. Okay? Because it goes back to the analogy that I gave about the gunner, the grifter, the person that was, hyperly aggressive and thought they had all the answers, but yet they failed miserably. And I say that because I think ultimately, we all have a responsibility of really demonstrating our faith in the correct way. With that said, I would love to take time out from anybody that has questions.
Before
Yeah.
Before we go to the audience, would it be possible for you to address, we advertise this as a holistic
Yeah.
psychiatry, so if you can do a bit of intro or like some direction.
Yeah, so again, there's a saying that you can run away from mental illness, but mental illness will not run away from you. And one of the things that I love about being a child and adolescent psychiatrist is that most mental illnesses basically start within the youth and young adults. I'm talking about, depression, anxiety, unfortunately, substance abuse. So I find that, and one of the things that can protect people from these pathologies is having a strong support system. I do find that authentic spirituality can be a good defense mechanism. And I also feel like even going back to my statement that on how mental illnesses or diseases of the youth, if I have a patient that comes to me in their 50s, 60s, and they're suddenly talking about mental illness, I have to make sure that there's not a medical problem. So, for example, certain disorders like pancreatic cancer, heart disease, diabetes, it can kind of present initially from a mental health perspective. So I think it's very important for us to kind of realize that and acknowledge that. When I talk about mental illness and even psychiatry and spirituality, specifically Islam, when people think of psychiatry, they think of mostly people that just prescribe, but there is a therapy component. And usually when you think of the therapy component, you first think of Dr. Sigmund Freud, right? Freud is basically viewed as the father of psychotherapy, specifically psychoanalysis. But how many people knew that a lot of Freud's theories was based on his study of Egypt, subsequently sub-Saharan Africa, technically, if you really to delve into it. So, and then, there's Freud, there's Jung, who also had a strong spiritual sense. And even though these guys, Jung was spiritual, but Freud was very anti-spiritual. But there was a reason for that. And one of the reasons for that was that Freud was an Austrian Jewish male. And at that time, there was a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment. So he was afraid that, and this is the theory that some people had, that if you focus too much on his spirituality, that would neglect the growth of his theory of psychoanalysis. Whereas Jung was the complete opposite. Over the years, there's been new theories, new modalities, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, that actually look at the holistic perspective. So, for example, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is the gold standard of this disorder called borderline personality disorder. And when I say borderline personality disorder, what I'm speaking about specifically people that suffer from extreme mood dysregulation. The moods can be very happy, can be very sad. These are people that tend to have a very tough time forming strong relationships with people. Is a classic, push and pull type of thing. So people like that, you can't necessarily just medicate them. There's something fundamentally at the core that needs to be addressed. So the dialectical behavioral therapy, looks at aspects of wellness, aspects of meditation, because that will help stabilize you, help stabilize your mood. It'll help with your cortisol levels. So I think, and for me, it goes back to that perspective. So when we talk about meditation, we can talk about breathing exercises, but I also find that prayer, making salat, is a form of meditation, which is profound. And the beauty of it all is that now, in 2024, if you look at psychiatric literature, the concept of the holistic perspective, what we call the bio-psycho-social model, which bio stands for biology, right? Psycho stands for psychology. Social stands for how we interact with people. We're looking at patients from all of those perspectives. And going back to the holistic perspective and why I'm talking about why you have to be very careful in not, not showing empathy to others and trying to get an understanding of where people are coming from, is that there's this thing called the ACEs, called Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's basically a scale of 1 to 10. And studies have shown that people that have higher ACEs, those are people that are more likely to develop medical problems. So what would be an example of ACEs? ACEs would be an example of coming in from a household where there was domestic violence was present. There are issues of substance abuse, issues of growing up in communities that are not safe, right? Now, these are problematic, and one of the things I love about the dialectical behavioral therapy is that it can acknowledge that you may have had a tough time in life, but the thing is, what are you going to do with that? Ultimately, is your responsibility to live a life worth living. And I'm going to tell you, that is so empowering. That is so powerful. So going back to this perspective, and another thing I love about being a psychiatrist is that almost every 3 to 5 years you can kind of reinvent yourself. So my current reinvention as a child analyst of psychiatry is sports psychiatry. So about a week and a half ago, I attended a panel up at NYU's Islamic Center that was featuring 2 football players from the Cleveland Browns. One is Jeremiah, I can't pronounce his name, but it's basically known as Jok, J-O-K, and the other person was Mahmoud Diabate. And what was really powerful about this presentation, and this kind of exemplifies what I'm trying to talk about, is the concept of the biopsychosocial model, that these men, psychologically very, very strong, biologically, these are professional athletes, so you can't say enough, right? And socially, very, very strong support. And what I love about these two presentations, and the athlete Jock, he's gotten some national recognition that he was featured in the Super Bowl. He's the brother that's always dressed in traditional African garb. A lot of people don't know that he's Muslim. He actually made Shahada last year, and he's going to be experiencing his first Ramadan. Profound. And his background, his dad's from Ghana, his mom is African American. And the other player, Mahmoud Diabate, he's first generation immigrant, and his parents are from Mali. Do you know what that means? That means this is a person coming from a generation of Muslims. And what was really special, and this goes back to the issue of understanding the spirituality, the holistic, the mental health perspective, is Mahmoud grew up in a very rural town in Alabama, and that was secondary to his father being a professor at one of the local schools. So he grew up in this really conservative town. And again, the stereotypical immigrant experience. His parents were saying, you know what? If you want to be an engineer, we will do anything that you want to do. If you want to go to Kumon, if you want to go to Mathnasium, don't worry about it. We got you. But this NFL thing, that's on you, okay? So, and I get it. I get what he said. Because oftentimes when I speak to my NFL players, when I speak to professional athletes, but especially the NFL, they'll say, this is not a career. This is an experience, okay? This is because most careers last 2 to 3 years in the NFL. So think about it. You spent your entire life, and again, I'm in Texas, so I don't have to tell you about what football means, right? So you spend your entire life, trying to get to the NFL. Then you find out when you actually get to the NFL, you're gonna have at most a 3-year career. But again, Mahmoud basically similar to a revert, even though he was raised in he has an Islamic lineage. he took this football thing personally, and he made it his own. And there was like a really interesting question, and the question was, how do you feel to be in the NFL and to be a practicing Muslim? How do you feel? And his response was that, believe it or not, being a practicing Muslim gave me a level of discipline that a lot of my teammates didn't have. And then he gave the example, we talk about Fajr prayer, right? I get up 30 minutes before then to work out. Then I pray, then I work out again, then I go to school. Because of my faith, there are certain things that the team does not have to worry that I'll get involved in. And then he mentioned how one of the star players in his town was arrested 2 years ago for actually killing a person secondary to a DUI incident. And people that follow football probably know who I'm talking about. Completely destroyed his life. So he said that in many ways his faith has really, really given him a certain amount of comfort, of understanding. The other player, Jock, was going to be celebrating his first Ramadan. It's just a classic example of a person who is basically discovering himself, discovering his identity, but also looking how his faith can encompass reaching all the potential that he has and really taking full advantage of his career. And one of the things that I basically noticed from both of these athletes that have reached the zenith of their potential is that it goes back to the perspective that every single person in this room has to make the decision of, what does this faith mean to me? How am I going to display this faith to the rest of the world? And we know that as Muslims, essentially we are praying for ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't really need our prayers. We do these things for ourselves. We fast for ourselves. We give zakat for ourselves. That's taking it to the next level, right? So when we're looking at, and also want to say something too. Sometimes, okay, one thing that I also wanted to mention, so I mentioned that, how I'm here for a conference, and one of the highlights of the conference was that my committee presented an inaugural award called the Dr. Iverson Bell Jr. Award. Put like a long story short, Dr. Iverson Bell is a very prominent black physician. He was the founding program director at Morehouse, historically black college. In addition to that, he was also the training director at the University of Tennessee. So this is a very, very prominent person that's basically helped people from an intergenerational perspective. His father, Iverson Bell Sr., was the founding faculty member at Tuskegee College of Veterinary Medicine, and was also one of the founding members of Purdue's College of Veterinary Medicine. And what's funny is that his father has an award, a similar award named after him. So it was kind of cool that you see this lineage of father and son giving back to the community. The winner of this inaugural award, Dr. Sidney Ankerson from Mount Sinai, he's made his career as a psychiatrist doing research. And his specific research is studying how black churches can help address some of the mental health needs of the African American community. Meaning that for certain communities, you have to be able to work hand in hand with the spiritual leaders because they have a level of credibility that physicians may not have. So this has basically been his study, and he has done phenomenal, boots on the ground work. And this goes back to the perspective of what I'm talking about, the importance of prayer, even the importance of praying within a group. That's really powerful. And I can tell you how I've seen the power of that. And also the point of being very empathic and understanding people. I once had a patient, and this was when I was in training. I was on call, and I was called to see this patient. I go upstairs to the psych floor. I see this guy, and this guy is literally eating the Quran. Eating it, just ripping it up, just eating it. I was like, my God, what's wrong with you? But I took a step back. Okay. Asked him, sir, what are you doing? What are you doing? And this man's response was that the voices are so powerful, and I'm afraid of the voices. And I need to feel God. Allah needs to be inside of me. But I'm feeling I'm so scared. Completely different perspective. Completely different perspective. And then when I was speaking to this patient, getting to know him a little bit better, this was an African-American male who was a Vietnam War vet, had a substantial history of mental illness, but he was very active in a West African Senegalese mosque. And one of the concerns that we have with the mentally ill is that people tend to forget them. Unfortunately, you go to downtown Austin, and you'll see these souls just walking around, almost invisible, but yet present. What was unique about this brother was that the imam at his mosque would visit him at the mosque, at the hospital. He would be a part of our treatment plan. The members of his community would visit this brother, okay? Because he was so active in that community. And I would say this was a very, very sick person. This was a person where, unfortunately, psychiatry, just medicine in general is not exact. So you can give a person the best medication possible, whatever. Some people are just will be refractory. So he still was really traumatized by his illness. But I was really impressed by how this community had really taken a hold of this brother. Now I will say that it's not, there's not a completely happy story. It is a sad story. So after about a month of him being hospitalized, him, relatively being stable, we were planning on discharging him. And while we were discharging him, something had happened. We assumed that the command hallucinations were too strong, and he wound up dying. Okay? And then the question was,
Was it a suicide?
Yeah, it was a suicide. It was a suicide. And we were, and the irony of it all is that, I was the doctor that initially saw the patient when I was on call, and the physician that was taking care of him was also a Muslim brother from Syria. And, we were concerned. We were saying, is this guy going to be able to be buried? Is he going to be able to have an Islamic burial? And again, the beauty of that mosque, the imam came to us and said, you know what, we're still going to bury him because we don't know exactly what happened. And we knew that this was a person that was suffering profoundly, And the lesson that I got from that was just the importance of humility. We can, as man can plan, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. And what we can do to our fellow men and also to ourselves is first maintain our boundaries, be forthright in protecting the oppressed, in being kind to our fellow human being, but also understand that ultimately it's really up to God. There's only so much you can do. So to me, that was a powerful lesson. Because again, I'm sure you heard, there's going to be a presentation on, mental illness and Islam, and I'm going to say, do this and you will never have problems again, and when you leave, you have a Tesla in your garage. I can't say that. I mean, life is life, and you are going to be tested. You are going to be tested, but how do you view that test? And it goes back, the beauty of being a Shia, following this school of thought, is that if our imams could be tested, the purest of the pure, who are we? So how will you handle your test? Life is a game. Life is a game. Hence one of my interests in sports psychiatry. Life is a game. But what does it take for you to win? What is the definition of winning? During the day of judgment, we know what's going to happen. Good deeds, bad deeds. Right? So, and the irony of it all, if you look at the sports world, the beauty of so this is Austin. So maybe some of you guys may be San Antonio Spurs fans, right? But if you look at the proverbial name of the LeBron James or whatever, or even football like Tom Brady, what's so unique about these people is that during the game perspective, they love challenges. They love making that comeback, right? It's this is what we call this grit, this resiliency. And that's what life is. How are you going to be grit? How are you going to display grit? How are you going to display resiliency? When facing struggles, how are you going to overcome that? Because the reality of the matter is that sometimes the things that may be perceived as issues or problems today, tomorrow when you look back at those things, you will see, that was a miracle. That helped me. That gave me insight. So if there's one thing that I would want all of you to take from our brief time together, is for you to understand that you've been blessed with a very special faith, but there's a responsibility. There's a responsibility. People will be judging you. People will be looking at you. The way you treat my family, that's important. Because I will tell you, I will share something with you. Like a month ago, I had a situation where I brought my parents to a mosque, and my younger son was actually doing a presentation. And there was this one member of the executive board that treated my mom so poorly. You telling me that I'm not going to be a witness against that person during the day of judgment if things don't change? But that's personal. Okay? So, understand what you have, but rise up to the